My name is Indiana Bones. I'm an archaeologist, explorer, adventurer, cryptozoologist, street art expert, and friend to pigeons. Join the adventure as I explore mysterious places, forgotten history, and track down unknown creatures. This is where Saturday adventures began. For decades, only this small stone marked the final resting place of T. Jean Kerouac. He's a little obscure these days, but you might know him as Jack. I read his novel On the Road one summer on my front porch, drinking woodchuck ciders and collecting unemployment. Then I started traveling. Jack grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, where he was a football star that dreamed of being a famous sports writer. That plan was derailed in 1940 when he broke his leg in a football game during his freshman year at Columbia University. He spent some time away and returned to Columbia in 1942, but his sports career was decidedly over. Around this time, he began hanging out with a morphine addict and minor criminal named Bill Burroughs. Bill's grandfather invented the typewriter, so there was always money to get Bill out of trouble. That's exactly what happened when Jack and Bill helped another friend cover up a murder in 1944. Both were arrested as material witnesses. Bill's father paid his son's bail immediately, while Jack was left to sit in jail. Bill went on to murder his wife in 1950, and then used his grandfather's fabulous invention to write the excessively seminal abstract novel Naked Lunch. To the best of my knowledge, Jack did not participate in any further murders. After that episode is when Jack began his time on the road. He hooked up with a drunken drifter with a history of domestic abuse named Neil Cassidy, and the two embarked on a countrywide hitchhiking adventure that became the plot of Jack's most famous novel. According to the most popular version of the legend, the book was written on a 3-week Benzedrine binge in 1951. Jack taped together pieces of paper into a 120-foot scroll so that he could continue typing without stopping to change the pages. Like all good novels, On the Road was written in New York City, but it's up in the air if Jack was living with his wife in Manhattan or living with his parents in Ozone Park. Jack's first novel, The Town and the Country, had gone completely unnoticed, and for more than 5 years he couldn't get a publisher to even look at the On the Road scroll. He may have died an obscure drunk if not for his friend, Allen Ginsberg. Allen was the youngest of the group that would one day be known as the Beat Writers. For a long time, Jack, Bill, and Neil were just drug addicts and drifter criminals wandering around the country causing trouble. Ginsberg was not content to commit crimes and shoot morphine, though. He wanted the world to notice him. In 1955, Ginsberg published his most famous work, a long-form poem called Howl, and Kerouac was present for its very famous reading at the Sixth Gallery in San Francisco. Ginsberg was contacted the next day by a young publisher named Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and from here is where the Beat Writers went from troublemakers to literary icons. Ferlinghetti still owns City Lights Bookstore on the corner of Jack Kerouac Street. In 1957, Jack was living here in Orlando, Florida. On the Road was about to make him very famous, but he was still a nobody working on his third novel, The Dharma Bums. This little house was restored in 2013 and now serves as a residence for young writers. Kerouac was basically the Tolkien of Scumbags. He wrote a lot of books, but very few people have read more than 2. The rest aren't very good. Jack hated editing, and his stories were mostly rambling nonsense. Even the current version of On the Road on the shelves today is not the version Kerouac was proud of, but a heavily edited second edition. Remaining ever present in the literary scene, Ginsberg portrayed a rabbi in the background of a Bob Dylan music video. Burroughs was a spiritual guide for the early punks, recorded an industrial song with Ministry, and shot heroin with Kurt Cobain. Both outlived Neil Cassidy and Jack Kerouac by decades. Kerouac retreated from public life, and the world went on without him. Fame brought nothing but misery to Jack Kerouac. The last few years of his life were spent in a small house in Florida, living with his mother and newly married to his childhood sweetheart, Stella Sampras. He drank so much wine that in 1969, his liver exploded and he began oozing blood from every orifice in front of his terrified wife. Kerouac was buried in Edson Cemetery and for decades was commemorated only by a small stone that he eventually shared with his wife Stella. His childhood nickname was included on the stone, but not Jack, the name the world knew him as. According to legend, Bob Dylan would sneak into the graveyard every year to eat dinner with Kerouac. The stone was littered with empty bottles and pens laid in tribute. In 2015, a new stone was added to the grave with his signature and a quote, "The road is life." That has been just as true for me.
I'll be there to guide you into the great unknown. The great unknown. The great unknown. 'Cause I bear witness. I won't let you go unseen. When everyone looks away, unsure of what to do or say, I see you.
Ginsberg was contacted the next day by a young publisher named Lawrence Fergal. I should have practiced that word.
Ferlinghetti.
Ferlinghetti.